The story begins in 1966. A young boy is playing in his room. Suddenly, he hears his mother calling him. He goes to the bathroom and opens the downstairs cupboard, where he finds his mother in a very strange state. His mother says, "I'm hungry and I want you to bring me some snacks." The boy immediately goes to the kitchen, brings an apple, and gives it to his mother. His mother eats the apple and asks if he'll bring some for his friend too. But just then, his father arrives and tells the boy to stay away from his mother. But his mother grabs the boy and starts eating, and the scene cuts away. We then return to 1987, where a cameraman is shown, a man who has come to Harold's house to make a documentary about him. This documentary focuses on the strange things that happen in Harold's home and the events that happen to his family. Harold gives the cameraman water, and it becomes clear that the documentary being shot will be about Harold and his son. Harold's son and his wife died a few years ago, and everyone began to suspect him. Harold wanted the cameraman to reveal the truth, that he wasn't the murderer. He had paid the cameraman in advance, and they began their work. Harold sat down on a chair, and the cameraman set up the camera. He then began recording. Harold began telling his story, recalling the day when the horrific incident occurred in his home, when his wife and daughter died. To clear himself of the accusation that he wasn't the murderer, Harold decided to tell his story in full detail, revealing everything he had been hiding until now. Then Harold led the cameraman into the basement and showed him the place where his wife's body was found. He explained, "I had gone far away on business, but when I returned, I found my wife's body in a terrible state. Her face was terrified. It seemed she had seen something in the bathroom before dying. Her arms and legs were covered in bite marks." Harold said, "It's obvious the police suspected me, but when they checked the teeth marks, they weren't mine. And since they couldn't find any evidence against me, they didn't arrest me." The cameraman, in conversation, asks about Harold's son, but Harold hesitates to answer, even though he was part of the documentary. To make the point, Harold starts showing the cameraman his own photographs. Children are playing outside, and Harold points to them. "People think there's a witch living in this house, a very dangerous witch." He laughs out loud. The cameraman thinks of leaving, but Harold stops him by offering him some extra money. He says, "Stay here until the shoot is complete. I'll pay you extra for any extra time." The cameraman agrees to wait after hearing the money. He then starts watching the videos shot with his camera. He watches Baseman's video in slow motion, and when he increases the brightness, he sees a strange being behind Harold, which he finds quite strange. Before the cameraman can say anything, Harold calls him over and shows him an old film reel. This reel is actually from the time of Harold's wife's death. His wife was in very bad condition, and the strange thing is that Harold is smiling at all this. He doesn't find anything strange about it. Harold also tells the cameraman that people say there's a witch under his house who eats people. Hearing and seeing this, the cameraman feels uneasy and faints. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself tied up. Harold meets a woman there, who, after speaking to him, leaves. The cameraman says he wants to leave, but Harold explains that the food in his kitchen was laced with drugs for you. "But you didn't eat anything. Then I spiked the water and gave it to you, and you fell unconscious." Harold further explains that his only job here is to capture people for him, and you were also chosen by him. "I didn't choose you." And she calls herself Beezle. He's talking about a witch. It's said that a witch has been living under the house for 100 years, even before me. She lives on the sacrifices of people and will continue to live on because she receives sacrifices from them. She lived by feeding on it, and she only eats human flesh. That's why everyone was afraid to come to this house and kept away from it. The witch would give birth to a child every 300 years. I too had made many sacrifices in my life, including my own wife. Beezle ate my wife's corpse for a few days, feeding on it, which was very difficult for Harold to watch. But then she learned to live under these circumstances and took on the responsibility of feeding the witch. That is, as long as Harold was alive. Now Harold's second wife also helped him in this work, that is, the same woman who came to visit him. Here we are shown that Harold's eyes have changed, revealing that he too has now become the witch's slave. The cameraman, enraged, thrusts a screwdriver into Harold's throat, causing Harold to collapse and begin to die. But then Beezle Witch becomes enraged. She enters and decapitates the cameraman, resulting in his tragic death. Harold also dies in this horrific incident, leaving his second wife alone. We then flash back to 2003, where a nurse comes to Harold's wife's house to care for her. Harold's wife is still living there, and her health is deteriorating. Therefore, the nurse came to take over as her caretaker. She replaced a caretaker named Charlotte, who had left Harold's wife for some reason. No one knows what that reason was. It's possible she was also sacrificed to Beezle, or she herself ran away in fear. The nurse meets Harold's wife, who smiles strangely at her. Unsure of what she's doing, she tells her, "Your smile is very sweet." But she doesn't realize that behind that smile lies a horrifying story. The nurse then brings him food, but Harold's wife refuses to eat. She then checks on him and finds a tape recorder on the floor that belonged to the previous caretaker, Charlotte. Natas takes the tape recorder and, after playing it for Harold's wife, starts to leave. But then she hears some voices. When she goes back to Harold's wife, she finds her talking strangely. Harold's wife is muttering something about what she took away. First, to Charlotte's sister, then to Charlotte. Hearing this, the nurse realizes that before Charlotte, her sister also worked as a caretaker. She can't understand these things, so she leaves to listen to the tape recorder. When she plays it, she hears Charlotte's voice, explaining that things had started to get weird with Harold's wife as her condition had worsened. His health had deteriorated so much that he had stopped eating and drinking, and the doctor had even declared that his time was short. He was about to die. But when Charlotte went to see him at night, she overheard some drowsy words from Harold's wife. Harold's wife said that he had harmed Charlotte's sister because of him. Now she needed someone else. Harold's wife was also talking to someone in a terrifying voice. Now the nurse listened carefully to the tape recorder. Harold's wife told him not to harm anyone else. Charlotte's sister was enough for him. But the drowsy voice said, "No, I need Charlotte too," and the recording stopped. To find out the truth, the nurse turned on the recording and placed it near Harold's wife while she was sleeping. Whatever she said in her sleep would be recorded. The nurse will guess what the problem is with this house and with Harold's wife. But when she wakes up a little while later, she sees Harold's wife standing before her. Her eyes are white, and there's a strange, terrifying smile on her face. She looks as if she's possessed, as if she's been controlled by the witch. The nurse screams in fear, but then realizes it was just a nightmare. When the nurse listens to the recorder, she hears Harold's wife's voice. She says, "Enough is enough. She should just feed on this." Then a terrifying voice comes from the recorder saying, "Hello," accompanied by a strange commotion. The nurse is terrified and looks around, but no one is there. She goes down to the basement, where she hears Harold's wife screaming for help. Coming downstairs, she finds Charlotte and her sister's ID cards, which she realizes Harold's wife has done something to them both. But we know it's the work of the witch Beezle, who is also controlling Harold's wife. Just then, the nurse begins to feel someone around her, and in fear, she runs away. In her haste, she spots a small door, enters it, and finds Charlotte inside, alive but in a very bad condition. The nurse tries to save Charlotte, but then the same drowny witch arrives and attacks the nurse, brutally killing her. Then the scene shifts to 2013, where a new couple moves into the house. Harold's second wife was also killed, and this couple's children were theirs, Harold's son and his daughter-in-law, Nova. Nova's husband came to sell the house. But Nova wanted a child, and her husband didn't care. He didn't want one under any circumstances, which made Nova very sad. One night, while Nova was sleeping, she heard a noise coming from under the bed. She looked under the bed with the camera light, but couldn't see anything. Then she saw someone's feet near the door, right next to the bed. Nova peeked under the bed and looked again, and felt the feet come closer, slowly creeping up onto the bed. When she looked in the mirror, she realized it was her, but it was a strange situation. Nova and her husband's eyes looked completely different, as if they were both possessed by some dangerous force. The next day, when she couldn't find her husband, Nova went to the basement to look for him. There, she found an old box, which she brought with her. Then she heard a noise from a door and found a small baby. Nova kept the baby because she had always wanted a child, and today her wish had been fulfilled, as this baby was so tiny. She sat the baby downstairs and began feeding it. But Nova's husband saw not the baby but a dead cat. He explains to her that it's just a cat, not a baby, so he snatches it and throws it away. But Nova sees the baby as her mental state begins to deteriorate, and all this was the work of none other than the drowny witch Beezle, who was looking for a new victim, and she found it in Nova's form. The next day, he notices that Nova and his own behavior are strange. Then, he watches a video from the previous night when they were together. He's perplexed. He goes to the basement to find out what's going on, as Nova went there last night. There, he finds an old camera that belonged to Harold. This camera contains videos of Harold's first wife's death and the drowny witch, which frightens Nova's husband, and he doesn't understand what's going on. The video then becomes even more terrifying, and his condition worsens. He comes to Nova and says, "It's time to leave this place. We can't stay here." But Nova isn't ready to move. Just then, she receives a call from someone who wants to buy the house, which makes her husband happy. That night, when they were together, Nova's husband says they'll move to Paris. Nova is delighted by this. But the next moment, she attacks her husband. It turns out it was just a nightmare. But the next morning, when Nova's husband wakes up, he finds Nova in a terrible state, about to attack him and kill him. At this point, we learn that Nova is pregnant, and this was all a witch's plan. In reality, Beezle has reached 300 years old and wants a new child, which she would have conceived by posing as a human. She controlled Nova's husband and Nova, bringing them closer together so that Nova could become pregnant and have a child, which she succeeded in doing. Within a few days, Nova gave birth to a child, which the witch ate, thus giving herself even more strength and youth, as eating children gave her more power. Now, in the next scene, another new family comes to live in this house. This means that the witch has her next victim. Nova was also killed while giving birth. Now, in this way, families will continue to die at the hands of Beezle, and this cycle will never end. It will continue forever. And with this horrific ending, the film ends its story.